So the idea is to get a little bit ahead here in the French Revolution, start working on those genius projects, and to bring those questions in so that we can deepen your discussion. I think a lot of you have a lot of good questions, so we just want to make sure that we can kind of tune into those and get things rolling. So let's take a look. Goal. Your goal is to be able to outline the causes and processes of a revolution or any revolution. The reason that we're looking at revolutions is this semester we're going to talk about the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Russian Revolution, imperial revolutions in opposition to the imperialism that takes place in World War I and kind of kicks off World War I. Our inability to follow that in the present day. Some of you might get into that in your genius projects, and what the United States looks like as an imperial power and where we're at currently with those things that we've imposed on our peers. So let's take a peek. When we roll in tomorrow, we are going to sing the Wheels on the Bus to the revolutionary. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a song, kind of feel it a little bit, get the wheels rolling. All right. And let's take a peek at the lyrics real quick. There it goes. The governments of the world are going to go round and round. Essentially what's happening is that people are going to do what they do. The power is going to be where they come from. And early on in our studies, power mostly comes down. So all the power is coming down from the French monarchy, from the English monarchy, the emperors of China, you name it, the power comes down. Even in India, the Guptas and so on. So when we look at that, that's where we're going. Now, as things get bad in those empires, like we talked about in the dynastic cycle and the mandate of heaven, the whispers in the crowd go swish, swish, swish. So people are going to start whispering around. And the whispers are going to go all through the land. Then the opportunity for progress goes open and shut. So people are going to see, all right, they're going to have hope, and then all of a sudden, they're going to get shut down because the government is not going to allow them the freedoms to go ahead and see and realize those progress parts, and all the peasants are kept down. So keep the peasants down. All right. The complaints of the thinkers, like we did right before the break, the Enlightenment thinkers, the complaints of the thinkers are loud, loud, loud. Right? Loud, loud, loud. Okay. And the king uses money like glug, glug, glug. So everybody's complaining, things are bad. But unfortunately, the government is not paying attention to that, and they're continuing to spend money as they choose. When we talk about this, we're talking about Louis XIV, Louis XV, Louis XVI. Specifically in France, they're going to use what's called deficit spending, and the taxpayers are not going to be super happy with that because, as we talked about in our objectives over here on the board that you can't see, the responsibilities of the government is to take care of people. So if they're going to collect large taxes, then people should at least be able to be fed, was the argument. Following that, the people's chains fall like clink, clink, clink. So break in the cuffs, right? Clink, clink, clink. And then the factions in the revolution say wah, wah, wah. So as the revolution kicks off, unfortunately, everybody seems united, but then they're kind of going to fall apart, and the hands in front of the eyes, and they're going to rub like the baby on the bus. And then finally, the radicals shut the liberties down, and they're going to go shh, 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 like the mamas, okay? All right. And then the moderates in the revolution say, I love you, and everybody says, I love you too, and the revolution comes to a close. So the song is going to put the revolution in order for us, kind of an activity song item. We're going to start with that in class tomorrow. So if you want to review the Wheels on the Bus, if you want to go through the revolutionary lyrics, they'll be posted. So let's get on with it. Part of what we're doing here at the beginning is reviewing the course. So when you have a presentation, stuff that's in purple and written in yellow is going to be the items that go in your notes. So the things that you need to get are people are upset about lost liberties. People have hope, but feel they have to accept less. Right? Social classes become more rigid and hostile to one another, and the scholars give up on the way society operates. So when we're looking about this and we're thinking about our song, the people are in the crowd going swish, swish, swish. All right. they have hope, but feel like they have to accept less because of a lack of governing. The social classes become more rigid and hostile. The rich are anti-poor. In France, the poor are starting to attack the rich in the Great Fear. And the scholars give up on the way that society operates. So the complaints of the thinkers get loud, loud, loud. In the back here, you can look at some images of how people have said that the United States has done some oppression and some imperialism and some bad governing. So Spanish oppression of the Philippines, industrial slavery of Hawaii, the Spanish yoke that's been put on Puerto Rico and Cuba, and the Isthmus of Panama, right? So what are we doing? We're taking advantage of these locations to make money for our own country, and the monies are not going to the colonists. So as we continue, we get a mural of Gandhi in the background here. The government does not respond to the people, and so some leaders join the opposition. Some of the military leaders, when this happens, that's usually bad. When the military goes to the revolutionary side, as we see with the soldiers in the French Revolution coming up, then the people have guns, which evens the playing field a little bit. One of the reasons that we have the Second Amendment is that the right to bear arms is a way to keep the government from overrunning the people, or at least in the minds of our forefathers. The government is unable to get enough support from any group to save itself. So when we look at that, unfortunately, there's so many factions that have been broken up. Factions are dissenting groups of people. So many people with their own ideas about how to get things moving in the right direction. They just can't work together. And so then things start to fall apart. And the government is overspending as either going bankrupt or taxing too much. So if on either of these slides you needed to pause to get these in your notes, make sure you pause. When you roll in tomorrow, we'll do a note check to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so then once the revolution kicks off, all right, then what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the stages of the revolution. And in the background, we have the Declaration on the Rights of Man. And so it's basically the Constitution and the civil liberties of the French. And what are we looking at? We're looking at requests of the failing government can't be met. So the people put demands on the government that the government can't meet in its current set, so that we have to put together a new government. According to Britain, the revolutionaries gained the power and they seem united. So whenever we see all these people, there's, I think in your reading, there's about 42,000 troops that start marching on Versailles. Seems like they're all together. But once they kind of get control and they're trying to then move from a revolutionary body to a governing body, the unity is challenged by quarreling factions. So the different dissenting groups, like we talked about, those factions are going to be kind of pushing back. The moderates, the people in the middle of the political spectrum, so not the extremists, the conservatives on the right, or the liberals on the left, the moderates, the people in the middle are going to gain the leadership. But because they are moderate and because they are willing to compromise or unwilling to compromise with the extremists, the problem is that there's not enough change or there's too much change. So the liberals would say there's not enough change typically, and the conservatives would say that there's too much change. So they're unable to satisfy the people that they are trying to govern. The power is gained by radical factions and a strong man emerges. So these strong men that we talk about, we're going to talk about Robespierre. We are going to talk about Hitler. We're going to talk about Mussolini. We're going to talk about Lenin. These guys that we talk about are the Machiavellis of their day. They're willing to do what it takes, when it takes, to make sure that people do what they're supposed to do to be governed. All right, number 6, a period of terror occurs. So when the strongman takes over, obviously, if you are not on board with what they're doing, they've got to make you afraid, and they make everybody afraid. Once people have had enough of that terror, then the moderates are going to regain power. The moderate people are going to say, I love you, and the people are going to say, I love you too, and the revolution ends. So again, if you need to pause any of this, make sure that these stages are in your notes, because we're going to use those to kind of figure out where we are. Based on the time here, I think that we're going to skip the video. These are notable revolutions, and this will be posted. So if you want to watch this video in addition, you're welcome to. But where are we now, right? So what do we have? We have different types of governments that come out of these revolutions and the Enlightenment and how they function, and even the Industrial Revolution. So these items need to go in your notes. If you don't have these definitions or you don't know them, please add them. A dictatorship or totalitarianism is a government or country in which total power is held by a dictator or a small group. Fascism, this is extremely conservative, way on the right. It's a government that's ruled by a dictator who controls the lives of the people, and the people are not allowed to disagree with the government. In addition, fascism is usually erosive of people's rights. So when we talk about fascism, we're looking at civil liberties and individuals being not nearly as important as the state. So kind of eventually eroding people's rights. Communism is oftentimes totalitarianism mixes the line between these two, but communism is way on the left. It's the beginnings of socialism, which we see today. The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, is a book that some of you may want to check out for your Genius Project. And basically, the government owns the things that are used to make and transport products. There's no privately owned property. When you think about the Hunger Games, Coin is in charge of District 13. District 13 is completely communist. So when you think about that, that's kind of an image for you in your mind. Again, if you need to pause this at any time to get these notes down, go ahead and do that. Democracy/republic, it's right center. It's kind of what we have a mix of, a country that's governed by the people, elected representatives, and an elected leader. Some have argued, and I will possibly argue in class, that the Democratic Republic has a system that's set up in our government to avoid revolutions. And so I'd like for you to kind of think about that and be ready to argue against that or for it, whichever you desire as we go through this unit. Theocracy is extreme right. This is a government. Theo meaning God, crassy meaning government. It's a God government. We talked about it before. Socialism is left center, and is a way of organizing society in which major industries are owned and controlled by the government rather than by individual people and companies. One of the main items of socialism that's on the docket in our country is healthcare. So healthcare being run by the government would be a socialist idea. Many capitalist countries in the world have a socialist ideal of healthcare. And so that's kind of what we're debating in the U.S. right now. Finally, another theory that I kind of use as one of my biases that I'm trying to identify for you is that the political spectrum is a pendulum. So whenever we get too far in one direction, we get to the left. All right. So like Obama and the Democrats kind of pushed us to the left in our country. And so we got so far to the left that, in fact, the pendulum swings back the other way. And now we've gone Republican and conservative. So if you have any questions about that, let's talk about it. And then finally, if you'd pause right here, here's your exit for tomorrow. These are the questions that we're going to talk about when you come to class. And thank you for watching.